Hey everybody, as a result of a video I did about a week ago, I had some emails that came back to me asking, is there really a big difference in correcting white balance on an image that is shot as a JPEG versus RAW? So we're going to take a look at this image right here and compare it to the C. Is there really that much of a difference? Are we ready for this? Let's do it. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you're new to the channel, this is dedicated to photography and as a photo artist, pushing ourselves out of the box creatively. Now, one of the things that came up was about a week ago. By the way, this is 2025 in November. And the very first week of November, I put out a video, pretty long one. It's almost like, I think like 50 minutes long, on something I was taught years ago on how to approach in editing an image from start to end based on my vision. And I got some emails asking questions about white balance, because I covered white balance a little bit in that video. And they had some issues about, JPEG correcting white balance versus RAW, and also a new feature that just came out in Photoshop that we've never had before. It was in the beta version. I've been testing it for a while, and then they brought it in to Photoshop. So we're going to take a look at that feature and what I think it's personally good for. And so let's dive right into Photoshop right now and let's get a jump start on this. Okay, once again, is there really a difference between a JPEG and RAW file when it comes to correcting white balance? So let's take a look at this right now in Photoshop. Now, what I did, let me go to the open dialog box. And for new people, I just double click on my workspace. You can do that on a Mac versus PC. And these two images right here, it's the same image. And what I did was it was shot in RAW. And this came from a friend of mine years ago that was using a Canon, I believe, yeah, Canon camera on this one. And the white balance is purposely off. And I opened it up in Camera Raw, but I made sure all the settings were turned off, and I just exported it out as a JPEG. So this is the JPEG file. So let me open that up. So this is the JPEG. Let me just resize that and stick that right there. And then I'm going to go back to the open dialog box again. And then the difference happens to be if you're opening up a RAW file, it's going to automatically open up in Adobe Camera Raw. So let me make the correction in white balance here and talk about this for a moment. Number one, when I received this image, there is a technique that we could use with a certain target. You could buy these targets going to Amazon or any camera shop. They will carry these type of things. And this, I'm getting nitpicky on this, but this was actually used incorrectly. And the reason is we've got black, a neutral gray, and white. And because I can tell that the light source was coming from the left side of the camera to going across to the right, because you see the shadow right there, this should have been flipped around. White should have been there, the neutral gray, and black on that side. If you're going to use this, which some people do, to get the exposure correct in their image. So it could be used for two purposes: white balance, which that's what we're here for, but it also could be used for getting your exposure correct. And we know we have that feature in our camera that if we turn it on, if we overexpose something, it starts to blink in the blowout areas. And so that should always be closer to the light source. So that white should have been there. So a little bit off topic here. Sorry about that. But we're going to work with the white or neutral gray to get our white balance. Now, over here, there's a category called color. You can do this in any major software out there and Adobe Lightroom. So again, we're just using Camera Raw here in Photoshop. And over here, you're going to see a category called white balance. And I want you to focus on the drop-down menu for a moment here. So I've got things like auto, daylight, cloudy, shade, tungsten, flash, fluorescent. You don't see fluorescent that often anymore, but it's still out there, fluorescent lights. But you could choose something like auto to get a jump start, and that's correcting the white balance or coming close to it. And you can end up maybe tweaking it a little bit right there. I'm going to go back to as shot. But please remember all these different features we have here in the drop-down menu. Now, if I go over here to the eyedropper, this is another way we can correct our white balance by clicking on that, coming over here. Is there a difference between clicking on a neutral gray versus white? And the answer is going to be yes. So if I click on this, you're going to see it change. Not bad. If I click on the gray area right there, watch what happens. Just a slight difference, not much between the two, but there is a difference. Personal preference on what you like the best, or it just gives you a jump start and you're going to go back here and tweak and modify it. When you're done with this, you're going to click on open and that brings it into Photoshop. So let me resize this and put this to the side. Okay, so I did this with Camera Raw. Well, is there a difference with a JPEG? And I'm going to express my opinion on why I shoot in JPEG, not for client work, but for a different reason that I'll talk about a little bit later. But let's go to the JPEG image. And one of the things that they added that we never had before in Photoshop is a new feature. And by the way, I have to make sure you understand the date that this came out. This is the beginning of November, okay, of 2025. I've been burned too many times where people said, hey, that feature doesn't look like that anymore in Photoshop. And they're looking at stuff I recorded, say, a year ago, and then Adobe changed the interface or look of it or the feature of these things. And now, what I did before doesn't look exactly the same. So, it's not my fault. It's Adobe changing things down the road and stuff like that. So anyhow, in the Oreo cookie dipped with milk over here, there is a feature right here, right off the bat, called color and vibrance. And again, we never had that before. Non-destructive editing right here. And one of the things that we get to do is white balance. Now, we've had things, other areas that we can change, like vibrance and saturation. I'm going to ignore that for right now because we could actually do that someplace else. But they added the tint feature and temperature. But notice in the drop-down menu, remember in RAW, I was saying, look at all the features we have. Well, there are none. It's just that or custom. And basically, default is, well, that's the way it was brought in. So if I grab my eyedropper here to click on this, and I come over here to sample the white area, I get that. If I go over here, it changed a bit. Now, that one, is not the greatest. That's a little bit better. But since I corrected that, and again, it's now showing it's custom. And again, you could alter that, but take a look at the two differences. That versus that. Now, this is the same image, but by doing the white balance, it actually increased the exposure on this where the RAW file really didn't. And if I wanted to be exposed a little bit more, then I could push the exposure up in Adobe Camera Raw or in Lightroom if you're using it. But there is a difference between the JPEG and the RAW right off the bat. Okay, now we're going to do, again, a comparison here in a few minutes. I'm going to do this a different way. But one of the things that is important to know that if I'm over here, this is, again, non-destructive, right? And so if I can change my mind, or I can go over here and remodify this a little bit. So if I feel, oh, that's too much, I'm going to drop that down. If I want to push my vibrance down or up, you have those controls right there, which is fine. But let's talk about shooting JPEG versus RAW for a moment. Okay, I shoot JPEG a lot, and it's not for what most people think. Even though in the very beginning, I had to look this up because I forgot, but we never had Lightroom in the earlier days. When I started photography shooting JPEG, which was 2005, we didn't have Lightroom. Lightroom was beta tested, I think it was 2006, and we had version 1 coming into 2007. So when I was doing weddings and family shoots and stuff like that, I had the free software that I got with my Canon camera to open up RAW and stuff, but it just slowed me down if I had to use Photoshop going back and forth. It just wasn't the best experience. So I found that I was just shooting JPEG. Now, in shooting JPEG, here's what's important to know. It's really important to get good at exposure, proper exposure. It can be off a little bit, but proper exposure and correct white balance. Your white balance can be off a little bit, and you should be able to correct that. Not a problem at all. The problem you're going to have in correcting white balance on a JPEG, if you're way off, good luck. It's a bugger to do that. And you're going to be playing with all different sliders and scenarios to try to get that close, where if you would have done that in RAW, it makes it easier to fix that in one spot. Now, some people are going to say, well, why shoot JPEG? Again, the reason I do it, not on client work, even though I did it in the beginning because we didn't have Adobe Lightroom and stuff, but the reason I do it to this day is the train between the ears right here, my brain and eyes getting my white balance correct in the camera. And if it's off a little bit, so I can make a modified correction in the software. Not a big deal. It makes me better when I shoot RAW that I get close, because a lot of people, including me in the early days, we get sloppy. Oh, I forgot to change. I didn't have the correct white balance on my camera. That's okay. I can easily correct that in Photoshop or Adobe Camera Raw, I should say. And but why do that extra work? Get good at exposing good and your white balance. And so that's what I use JPEG for, and that is focusing on between the ears, and that's training my vision and handling a camera and getting that correct white balance. Okay, so commercial shoots or client work and that, as time progressed, no, I was shooting RAW, but fun stuff and for exercising, I was doing JPEG. Okay, so we can see there's a difference here, but now what I want to do is I'm going to close out of this stuff and start over. So let me close out of this. Not save that. And I'm going to do this a little bit different now. So I'm just going to start fresh. Now, when I open up the open dialog box, you're going to see this XMP file right there. That remembers the settings from the RAW file. So I'm just going to delete that. So that means when I open up the RAW file, we're back to the start right there. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open up this image just fresh from the start. So I'm going to click on Open. I'm going to duplicate this JPEG. Now, again, remember, this is a JPEG. Control J, 2 times. Command J on a Mac. That's just a quick way of duplicating the image. I'm going to close out of this one for right now. And, well, you know what? I changed my mind. I'll be on this one for right now. And I'm going to do what I did last time. I'm going to go over here to the Oreo cookie dipped in milk and choose Color and Vibrance. Grab my eyedropper. Click on this. And that one, I'm going to go with this one on the white. Now, I'm just going to leave that alone for right now. Now, what I'm going to do is, because this, if I close out of this layer right here, well, nothing changed because this adjustment layer is affecting everything here. So even if I close out of that, you see no change. So what I want to do is clip this to this. So there's different ways of doing it. I've showed this in the past, but I'm just going to come down here in Properties and just select that icon. Watch what happens to layers. It indents it with an arrow going down. That means this is clipped, and this adjustment is only affecting this layer. Hopefully that makes sense, which means if I close out of that by hiding that layer, by clicking on the eyeball, notice that disengage the top, and now it changed because this layer, again, is only affecting that. And since I turned it off, now we're seeing this image with no changes at all. And that's a duplicate copy of the JPEG. Now what I'm going to do is just going to do a right mouse click. It's a good habit to get into doing this if you're going to use Camera Raw here. So I'm just going to say Convert to Smart Object, which allows me to go back and forth non-destructive with the RAW file, the RAW camera filter. So filter drop-down menu. Let's go to Camera Raw Filter. Have this open up. Now again, this is not a RAW file, correct? This is the JPEG right here. And again, if I go to the drop-down menu right here, where are all my choices like I had before? Well, I don't. I have Auto, which I can choose, which did that, or As Shot. Now you can make the changes here manually too, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But here we have the eyedropper. So let me grab the eyedropper and let's click on the white area right there. What happened? What does that say? The clicked area is too bright to set the white balance. So this is more sensitive in this area when you're in the Camera Raw. So please click on the less bright neutral area. So I'm going to click on OK. Well, there is no other white in here, but I do have this, that neutral gray right there. So again, if I activate the eyedropper, activate that, and I click on the neutral gray, there it made the correction. Now I'm going to leave everything alone because again, this is sort of blown out in my opinion, and we have to adjust the lighting, the exposure. But I just want to make sure we understand the difference between doing white balance between a JPEG file and a RAW file. Now when I click on OK to accept that and it drops it in, Because I made this a smart object layer, if I double click on this, it will open that up in the Camera Raw and I can make my adjustment. But let's take a look at the difference between just adjusting the white balance right here. So I turn this on. This is the JPEG that was done in Photoshop using the new feature, and this was in Camera Raw. Is there a difference? Sure, a lot. Well, maybe not a lot, but enough where, okay, I've got to tweak this one and change my exposure. But not that big of a difference, but there is a difference. Okay, some images, based on how off you are in your shot with the JPEG, yeah, there's going to be a major difference right there. So in my opinion, get good at your camera settings. And then if you are shooting JPEG, then you just have a little bit of areas that you just have to tweak and modify. Now, I'm not a big fan of this in here, so let me turn that off for a moment. Let's focus on this. I'm going to open up another image because I'm going to share something with you that I like. I just am not a fan of going to this feature here and making the correction of white balance, maybe manually or whatever, but still, I think you're better off in Camera Raw, in my opinion, doing it there. But how about stuff like this, which does save some time? If I just have a neutral image like this, and this is just a stock image I've used in the past, and if I go over here to color and vibrance, and I want to warm this image up, I can easily just slide this to the right to warm up the image versus, oh, I want to cool it, move it to the left. Very easy and fast to do versus doing this in, say, levels or curves or some other method. I think it's just a nice convenience way of doing that. And then, vibrance, I could pull that down or up. So again, no right or wrong. It's just picking the right technique based on what you want to do with your image. All right, so what do you think? Make some comments here. Do you think it's important to practice shooting in JPEG to get better with your camera settings? And then if you did get the JPEG wrong, off a little bit, it's easy to tweak and modify that, and that's fine in Photoshop or any editing software if you want to make that correction. But if you're way off, I'm going to tell you something. You need to be shooting in RAW if you're way off, or better learn to use your camera better, because it is a bugger to try to get that white balance fixed on a JPEG image that's way off on color balance. So hopefully you've learned something here today. If you could do me a favor, by the way, and that is like the video, subscribe if you're not subscribed, hit that notification bell. The next time I upload a video, you'll get notified on that. All right, so with that stuff out of the way, let's get that camera out. All right, let's make mistakes. Let's shoot JPEG. Let's get that white balance way off. Why? Because we learned from making mistakes. See how good, the difference between editing that file in Photoshop to correct that versus a RAW file. Until next time, let's literally think out of the box. See ya.